We are going to start the day with our opening lecture, which is by no more and no less than Max Cooper, who is in London, and he is almost ready to come in and to present you with a lecture called Yearning for the Infinite. In Yearning for the Infinite, Max Cooper talks about the infinite, the fundamentals of nature. He talks about mathematics and different aspects of science. And he also talks about human nature, about humans always wanting more. Throughout his talk, in which he is going to show the visuals used for his Yearning for the Infinite project, he will be joined in by some of the collaborators of this project. From different parts of the world, Max Cooper will be joined by the architect and artist Jessica In. He also will be joined by data scientist and data visualization artist Martin Krzywinski. And he also will be joined with mathematician, artist, and Emmy Award winner for computer graphics, Andy Lomas. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Max Cooper. That, beware, not everyone is aware that his background is in science. So please welcome with a big applause to Dr. Max Cooper. Good morning, Max.
Good morning.
It's good to see you.
You too.
Yes. So, from London, Max Cooper is going to start his talk. Now, Max, whenever you want, you can just get started.
If we start with the first video, then I'll just start chatting. So, hopefully we can see, can we see a shot of the big screen playing the video, and then I can explain what's going on. So what I'm generally going to do is play some of the content from the album, so play some of the videos, and I'll explain what's going on and what the inspirations were and how I work. So if we can see that on screen, that would be ideal. Have we got that playing on the big screen now? The first one should be Let There Be with Thomas Vans. So the way I work, here we go. So this is some footage of something that looks a bit like computer-generated imagery, but actually Thomas works with real, substances, alcohol and water and insolubles, and he has these this mad scientist of mixing things, and he lays them out on these glass sheets with special lighting, and you get these really beautiful, very organic very rich structures. So the project came from the Barbican, which is an arts and music centre in London, and they wanted a commentary on, technology and how cryptocurrency and big data and all these things are changing society and biotech. And I was trying to boil them down into some sort of commentary that I could put into an artistic perspective. So rather than trying to do a data visualization as such, I set about trying to think about what all these technologies are doing and what it means and how I can describe that artistically. And I boiled this down to this yearning for the infinite idea, whereby people constantly want more. And what we see as progress in terms of technology is this, innately human, thing where we constantly have this drive to improve and to learn and to develop. And so I set about reading about the infinite, and I was reading about how the infinite has been visualized and how it's been seen in the past. And the first reference I could find, the historic reference, was this sort of infinite white light of Kabbalah, and that's what I drew on for the start of the show. So what you see here is an artistic rendering of this idea of this Jewish mysticism and this infinite white light. And you can see the hands coming out in the corners. So I wanted to reference the birth of modern thought. And these are ancient cave paintings you can see overlaid onto this infinite white light. And it's the idea is it's the start of this process of this yearning for the infinite, this process of technology and advance, and presented in visual form. And that's the way I generally try and work, is I want to take something, take these big ideas, but boil them down into some sort of visual cue, some sort of simple visual cue, and then I can use that to write the music to. So generally the way I work is very visually focused. I start with a visual idea, and then I use that visual idea to score the music to. So actually, even though I'm a musician, I actually usually write the visual ideas first, and then I use that to write the music after. So now it's coming to an end. It should move on to, if we can move on to repetition, we can skip to the next one now. So this is with a collaborator called Kevin Mclaughlin, an Irish filmmaker who I've done a lot of projects with. Kevin has a really special way of working. So I have a whole bunch of collaborators, people I talk to, and that's part of the reason I love working like this. Again, even though I'm a musician, I spend a lot of time chatting to really interesting artists and mathematicians and philosophers, and I chat to as many people as I can about the ideas before I start the actual music process. So I start developing a visual language for the ideas I'm trying to communicate, and then trying to map that to music and figure out how I can tell a story in an abstracted sense. So this one is called Repetition. I'm not sure if you can hear the music there as well, but the music is very repetitive. It's this sort of constantly repeating chord with small, very limited changes, and that's pretty much the whole piece of music. And I wanted to, in this case, we were playing with the ideas of parallax, infinite parallax, which you can see here as the buildings go off into the distance. So again, we were looking for ways of visualizing the infinite in a literal sense, so an infinite parallax, but also ways of representing, how they relate to humans and our behavior and our society. So, we tie these together with these infinite built structures, building on imagery of cities and repeating them the same way as the music is all repetitions, and the built environment becomes repetitions to the infinite as well. And it's a commentary on the growth, the sprawling growth. So obviously this idea of yearning for the infinite, it has negative connotations as well as positive. The positive being the beauty of our progress and the things that we create, but it has a negative connotation in terms of consumption, essentially. So the project was a commentary both on, as with most things, there's pros and cons, and that video has the beauty of our achievements, but also the sort of terror involved with these huge structures and what the future holds in terms of our city structures and the population and resources. So that was a nice project by Kevin there, that we were able to comment on some of these things. It seems maybe the next video started then. It might have skipped. Let's go to Penrose Tiling. So I don't think Jessica will join us today, but I'll still chat about her project. So Jessica's, she does mathematics and architecture, and she does a lot of quantitative art. So I'm always, in search of artists who have, who I can challenge with technical, visual projects. So, in this case, I was thinking about another way of visualizing the infinite, and there's a mathematician called Roger Penrose from Oxford. At least he teaches there, or he's a professor there. He came up with this tiling system, an aperiodic tiling system, which can tile an infinite plane without repeating. So I was looking for aesthetics, ways of technically representing the infinite, but or artistically, and trying to tie them together. So he's invented this tiling system that can go on forever without ever, you can't just pick a certain unit of it and repeat that. It just goes and goes and goes.
Max, do you think that we can connect with Jessica right now and chat with her?
Yeah, well, she's not actually on the chat here. So we were planning to, but for whatever reason, she's not on the chat here. So yeah, I'll just have to chat through her a bit, and then we can go on to chat to Martin on the next one.
Okay.
So if we go back to the screen, we can see this infinite tiling system. And the challenge for me always is how to take these visual ideas and also map them to the music. So in this case, I wanted to try and make an analog of this, aperiodic structure musically. But I don't have, all I have is that, it's slightly different dimensionally music than a 2D image. So what I did was I took prime number loop lengths. So the primes are the numbers that build the other numbers, and the multiples of the primes never overlap with multiples of other primes. So by using lots and lots of different loop lengths, which were all prime numbers, I was able to get an aperiodic musical structure in the same way that the visuals are an aperiodic, tiling structure. So I'm always looking for those sort of links. How can I use these ideas to push me in a new way creatively, musically? Sometimes it just means I'm scoring, like I'm writing a film, writing music for a film. And I'm trying to just get the emotions and score and sort of match the imagery through my own, method of communicating the ideas. But sometimes I can make a more literal mapping, like in this case where I was able to make a really, explicit structure related to the visual idea, which then I could build the rest of the piece of the music around. So again, that's part of the reason I do this work. Obviously, part of the reason is I get to chat to loads of interesting people and have a lot of fun doing this stuff, but also it's a great creative tool for making me work in new ways. So yeah, that's Jessica Inn's work. So I'd recommend seeing her things. They're really beautiful. So let's go on to. We can skip the next one and let's go on to Aleph 2 with Martin, because we've got Martin on the line here from Vancouver. So it'd be nice to bring in Martin for a little bit of a chat. I mentioned a second ago about how so we can skip that one and go to the next one. I mentioned how I come up with these. I decide, okay, I want to make a music video about Cantor's work on transfinite numbers, right? Because again, so this is another way of approaching the infinite and getting a different aesthetic. And I've got an idea, I write these things out, and then the challenge is, how can I find someone that can actually do this, right? So I came across Martin's work via his Pi Day. He does a lot of beautiful visualizations of the digits of pi, one of which I've got on my wall downstairs, actually. He does a lot of work for really high-end academic journals in terms of data visualization. And so I just got in touch and started chatting to him, and we spent a long time chatting about how we can take this work of Georg Cantor. It's old mathematics, maybe 100 years old or so. I'm not, Andy or Martin will be able to tell us the date, I'm sure. But he was the first person to put the infinite on firm mathematical grounds. It seems like something that can't be mathematical. It just goes on forever, right? But he came up with this idea of sets, which are essentially lists of numbers. And if you have two lists of numbers and you can pair up every member of the lists, then they have the same, size, the same cardinality, it's called. He realized that you can have an infinite set, and you can pair it up. You have another infinite set. If you can pair all the members up, they're the same size of infinity. But if you can't pair all the members up, if one set is infinite, but you can't pair it with the finite, with your countable set, then you get a bigger sort of infinity. So this is an idea of a bijection between lists of numbers. It's just basically listing, comparing or making two sets of numbers. Basically taking a member from each list and making it pair up with a member from the other list. And if you can pair them all up, one for list, all pair of the other list, they're of the same size, but you can have infinite lists where one list will not pair up with the other one. So please skip to the next video, and then Martin can start commenting on how we actually visualized this. So this was the major challenge. So you can see it starts with just counting through the integers, but I'll let Martin chat a little bit about how he did it and what it's showing, if he's ready to chat.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So the challenge was to try to use a fairly low-tech representation to talk about the technical underpinnings of infinity, which are these really, really big ideas. And, we're not very much used to infinite values, because in physics and in the everyday world, there are no infinite quantities. Everything is finite. And when infinities come up in physics, we know that there's something that we don't understand. And so we have to look into it, like in singularities and black holes. In mathematics, on the other hand, it's quite the opposite. When infinities come up, it means that it's because we did understand something and we have scraped out some knowledge about these concepts. And they're deeply unintuitive. And so the video does start with counting, as Max said, and then looks at matching sets. And there is this analogy using a hotel to try to bring across the idea that concepts around the ideas of infinity don't quite fit into our minds right away when we think about them. So you have this hotel with infinitely many rooms, and it's full. But the fact that it's full does not mean that no more people can be accommodated. And so when a guest shows up and says, do you have room for me, even though the hotel is full because it has infinitely many rooms, you make room for them by just having everyone move over to the room next door, and you create an empty room. So this idea of infinity as a quantity, which we're used to thinking about quantities as finite, has to go out of our minds and has to be replaced with just new rules that the mathematics tells us about infinity. And the video tries to address the idea of a hierarchy of infinities. So not only is there the first infinity, all right, to infinity, but to infinity and beyond, there are other infinities that build on the first infinity. And amazingly, as Cantor postulated in one of his hypotheses, is that between these infinities, there's nothing. It's kind of like there's nothing between galaxies. There are no stars between galaxies. There's nothing between these infinities, and there are no sets that can describe those infinities. So it's a ladder, and there's various ladders, and they go to their own kind of infinity, which is difficult to get across in a video, right, Max? It was very challenging to try to build this anxiety inside people that Cantor felt when he worked on infinity, and he had nervous breakdowns, not just because the topic was hard, but because he was rejected and ridiculed by people because they didn't understand what he was doing. So try to get that across to the audience, where you're essentially overwhelming them with the frames that are coming at them with numbers. The symbols are fairly straightforward. They're just numbers. They're little symbols, but the speed at which it happens is overwhelming. And one of the things that Max always wanted is more flashing. We want more flashing. We have to flash as quickly as possible. So at some point in the video, when we reach this next hierarchy of infinity, the frames actually flash as quickly as they can, and you can kind of see it in the video right now as it's building up this power set of naturals. And just now there's this break in the music, and it starts to flash at 12 frames per second, and I hope no one was hurt in the audience by that. But it was a fantastic experience of being there and trying to take it all in. It's completely hypnotizing, and these brackets that are part of the notation started forming these patterns that were dancing.
Yeah, emergent forms coming from
these emergent forms, and so we try to, as we built the video, try to find opportunities to create these kinds of patterns that arise by smartly coloring things on the screen, still very minimally with just black, white, and red.
Yeah, and I think I would add, if you watch the video, you can see on the top left of the screen there's a little key which explains what's being shown. You know, counting the bijections, and if you watch on YouTube or Vimeo, whatever, there's an explanation that will lead you through what's being shown. Looking at the key at the top left. And you can see the processes of these diagonal arguments, which are really key to showing that you can have this infinity that's bigger than an infinity that you can count with the normal everyday integers. And the way he shows this is this Cantor has these two diagonal arguments which are both shown in this video visually. And for me, the visual representation of the arguments makes it really clear what's going on. It's a really nice, in my mind, a nice explanation of why you can have these bigger infinities when you see it, laid out visually like that. So actually, I'm really into the idea. I'm really into the, using projects like this for my own learning, but also as interesting tools for, just for demonstrating concepts which can be hard to put into words. So while what we may have been saying the last few minutes might sound a bit incomprehensible or whatever, a bit weird, if you watch the video and see what's happening and pause the frame and read it what's going on, it's pretty, it's sort of pretty sensible in the end. It's not, the ideas aren't that wild when you go through it step by step. And I like the idea, just a simple mention of, you've got all this list of these real numbers with long decimal expansions. You can have any list you want, but then you can go diagonally through them and change the first digit of the first one, the second digit of the second one, the third digit of the third one, the fourth, and so on. You change one digit of every number, and it doesn't matter what your list of numbers is, you can always change one digit of every number, and then that gives you a new number which isn't on that list. And that simple visual process shows to you, demonstrates, it proves that you can't count all the numbers built of any decimal expansion. And that's one of the these ways of showing that there's a list of numbers. That you can never put all the numbers in that list, so that list is uncountable, and then you get this bigger infinite structure. And that was something I learned about during this process of making this project. And that's why I love doing these projects, because I learn a lot, and we get these wild visuals that are great for scoring music too, and all sorts. So now the next one started, which is another one of Martin's. This one's called Transcendental Tree Map, and actually this refers to that artwork of his that I bought. So this is Martin's, in collaboration with Cobby, visualization of the digits of pi, which again I wanted to put in this idea of endless disorder and the aesthetics of infinite chaos, you could say. And the really interesting idea that digits of pi, even though they have no structure, and essentially when you try and structure them in this tree map that Martin's done, you end up with this, you can't see a pattern essentially beyond the pattern of actually just how the tree map was built. There is no pattern in the digits as far as we're aware. Yet those same digits represent the perfect form of a circle. So there's this really interesting duality between order and disorder, in nature, and it's really, really fundamental in nature. And I wanted to visualize that and have this idea that this infinite disorder can also represent the perfect form of a circle, which I just find fascinating and artistic. And that's the thing. That's why I do this work. I'm always looking for these ideas in nature, particularly in the fundamentals of nature, which seem to have an artistic aspect to them. And that really inspires me, and that's what I need. That excites me, and that's what I draw on to write music. Music comes from human expression and emotion and excitement. So this is, ideal material. This is what drives me to work. Martin, do you want to chat about this one?
Yeah, pi is deeply a fascinating number. There's a small number of such iconic numbers in mathematics, and probably pi is understood by most people. Of course, it never terminates. It goes on forever. And as Max said, it doesn't have a pattern, and yet because it never terminates, and it's something called a normal number, where no matter how many digits of it you take at a time, you're just as likely to find any one digit, such as a 3, as a 4. All patterns, therefore, are represented in pi. All messages you can imagine are encoded in pi in whatever means of encoding you like. All messages contrary to those messages are also encoded in pi. It comes up in equations, in all sorts of amazing places, and it all has to do with the 2 pi radians take you around the circle, and there are so many quantities in mathematics and in physics over which you calculate, and this amount of angles in a circle or volume in a sphere comes up all the time. And so it was actually really fascinating to make this video and to try to divide up the space until no more divisions were left on the screen based on those digits. And so it does look random. Of course, it's very difficult to see pi in there. But if you look at a circle and you haven't done any math, it's very difficult to see pi in a circle as well. You would have to know that that is a specific ratio of the circumference to the diameter. So perhaps the circle is as cryptic as our depiction here.
I mean, it just baffles me, this mapping between order and disorder. The fact that this same value, this same entity, is representative of order and disorder at the same time?
Yeah, we're very bad at judging both, as intuitive thinkers used to, the physical reality. We're very bad at guessing patterns, at detecting patterns that are subtle, and we of course are also pattern-seeking creatures, which means we see patterns where none exist. So mathematics has different ways of representing a pattern and representing information in a number or a set of characters, and we have to go to school and train really hard to build an intuition around how these patterns, how the information content in these patterns is represented. So,
Martin,
thinking about order
Max,
and disorder is fascinating.
I don't mean to interrupt, but maybe we should get going and see more videos and connect later on with Andy. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Let's bring in Andy.
Martin,
the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Martin.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to leave it up to Max to move forward with the presentation.
Start the next one. Yeah, if you start the next video, then and bring in Andy as well, that would be great. Here we go. So this video is actually from the live show. I wanted to include a little bit of the live show. This is something I haven't spoken about yet, because all of this work has a live element to it as well, and is built for this wraparound. You'll see lots of screens in the auditorium and on the video. You can see, there you go, there's the imagery on the roof, and it goes into the audience. All the walls are covered. So when I work with these animators and mathematicians, what have you, I'm asking for lots of layers of continuous image, and Andy was able to render these beautiful sort of biologically dividing structures. And the idea was this sort of infinite division of space aspect, and taking it starts off with a sheet, and then it constantly divides and divides and divides, and Andy pushes computational rendering to its absolute limits for this stuff. But I'll bring in Andy. I mean, he's a long-term collaborator and friend, and someone who does amazingly interesting work, drawing using mathematical models of cell division a lot of the time. And he builds these systems which have a life of their own as such. There's this big parameter space he's exploring, and you never really know what one's going to do until you run it, and you see, oh wow, look at this amazing thing that sort of these shapes and biological like structures that emerge, and then he runs it again and it's something different, and he's on that sort of boundary between experimenter, artist, mathematician, and generally just so let's bring Andy in to chat a bit about his work, because it's super interesting.
So is it possible, I'm going to ask our technical team, is it possible to speak to Andy? Is he ready to come in?
I'm here, yeah.
Yes,
So,
hello Andy.
Hello everybody.
Good morning and welcome.
Morning, welcome, it's great being here. So yeah, I guess there's so many of the themes that we already talked about are actually, I think, like really key to my work. And I guess the working on this project with Max, so is actually talking about the infinite and subdivision and space, and almost the transition from the understandably finite into what does it mean to go to the infinite things. So it's very much thinking about how does that relate to what I do. I guess a lot of what I'm interested in is almost the mathematical ingredients that nature uses. So I guess when we started doing like Tom's work, which was all using really natural phenomena of pouring fluids and things like that, I guess what I'm interested in is almost the very similar sort of rich, emergent, complex things, but coming purely computationally, coming purely from mathematics. So what I was trying to sort of see in this work was having these with what start almost just looking like these really mathematical grids, which just subdividing, just adding more and more triangles, more and more detail. But how by just having some really small little biases in the system, instead of it but just being purely geometric, though it is all computationally run, just some little biases and feedbacks in the system that one cell relates to the next cell. So basically, it's almost like at the corners of each triangle is where I've effectively got a cell that can split and grow depending on how much light it gets, and moves based on forces between the adjacent cells. And it's almost as the added ingredient of just some small feedback in the system, some small bias in the system. Can that result in completely unexpected, rich, emergent, almost surprisingly complex, surprisingly natural sort of structures. So that's what this is trying to show, that everything starts as just like this extremely simple ball, I guess like pi and things like that, totally rigid, simple geometry. But then just by having this like slight effects and things that just makes, maybe one cell is slightly more likely to split than another one because it's more exposed to food. And the direction they split may be affected by the movement of the other cells around. This little, almost like, so it's sort of like saying, nature uses these ingredients. Well, how can we use these ingredients to creatively also to explore pattern, explore richness? So there's in these simulations, I just want to say is there's nothing that comes from like real photos or anything like that. Hopefully by the end of each sequence, it's getting surprisingly almost like microscope biology and things like that. But there's absolutely nothing that I'm putting in like data like that into the system. It's not that here's a picture that it tries to become like at the end. It's purely a simple mathematical rule system, and I'm not changing anything during. It's almost like what happens at the beginning is still the same process that happens at the end, but it goes from being this almost like the sort of space domes, the sort of simple structures that you used to get architects built back in the 1970s, maybe to the more astonishingly rich things that we can create now. And also I guess one thing would be almost like the infinite is, I like the idea of more is more. And a lot of people go for the thing of less is more. I think when we're talking about these sort of rule-based systems, that is often you need to repeat it enough times. I'm always working millions of times, so that these simulations, I think, will run to about 30, 40 million cells by the end of them. And if you stop at only a few hundred or thousand cells, it still just looks totally geometrical. But it's only repeat it to millions, tens, maybe even hundreds of millions of times. If the system has these ingredients of bias and not just simple geometry, it's almost surprising how organic it can become, but it has to be repeated at that level. So it's almost repeating to infinity.
It's emergent. I mean, we started chatting when I first did my emergence project, and someone, mentioned Andy's work, and I was like, then we started chatting, and we've been working together on projects ever since. And it's the power of emergence. The thing that really interests me about Andy's work is how he uses it to. It's like a model system for the emergence of life. Even he has these biological like forms which emerge from an abstract system. He doesn't put biology into the system. He just puts basic ideas into the system, and things that we see like as biological emerge. And it really interests me, the implications of that for life on other planets, or the fine-tuning ideas about. How likely is it that complexity in life could happen in a different way? And Andy's system is a great model for saying, well, it can happen in lots of ways, and if you let these things evolve and you let the complexity, feedbacks and things develop with enough time, then we get these beautiful, rich structures emerging. So it has really wide implications, far beyond the basics of what you're seeing. Which I love. Again, that's why I love these projects. They have they're such sort of wide-ranging ideas with so much emotive power. That's just it's beautiful, and it's the art that exists in nature and in mathematics and in the foundations of the world around us, and that's what I'm always going in search of. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So shall we? Thanks very much, Andy. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy.
We don't have a lot. Yeah, we don't have a lot of time. So I think the only thing I want to mention really is, if we skip to the next one. I mean, so far we've been looking at these very technical, mathematically grounded ideas, but that's only a part of the project. It's not like there's a lot of more traditional cinematography and filming in there. This one's from Patrick Mclaughlin from Ireland, and he does this beautiful stop frame imagery. He was out in Ireland painting these huge circles, and he's that person with the white there, the crazy man walking around in circles forever, and the insane, yearning for the infinite human. So a lot of the project is from a more traditional sort of humanized imagery of cities and people in motion, and the sort of endlessness of repetition and our, our day-to-day lives. A lot of it's the commentary on that, and the project very much intersperses real footage of, our day-to-day lives and what it's like to be part of these big systems that we exist in, interspersed with these more technical, mathematical sort of, commentaries on the infinite. So it's that juxtaposition between the humanized side of the concept and the technical side, which is demonstrated. It's just that I guess we've chosen to focus a little bit more on the technical side. But yeah, are we going to take any questions?
I think that we have used up all of our time, so we cannot take any questions. But if you want to show us something else, I think that we can use these 3 minutes that are left. Sure. Maybe to see something else.
We've still got a couple more in the.
And to wrap it up.
Let's go to the next one from another long-term collaborator called Nick Cobby. Nick's based in Mexico City. And just as I was mentioning, this is a more traditional view of people as part of the system. I love, a lot of science is about objectifying things, and I quite like taking the objectification of humans as well and putting us in, just looking at us as another system, so let's go to the one after this, actually. Let's skip one more. And Nick took that idea with drone footage over Mexico City, and Mexico City is obviously bustling, and he got this beautiful footage and then interspersed some of the other work that you'll have seen already from Andy and from Martin and Jessica. So you'll actually see all three of the main ones we focused on brought back in to this video. So we've got overlays. If you can skip to the next video, please. Yeah, here we go. So you'll see overlays of the other videos, and so each one having a different aesthetic related to the infinite. So the show comprised of trying to combine them together, so you get these infinitely dividing structures, or the endless digits of pi, or the other videos brought into the city, where you've got this imagery of people going to work and endlessly traveling, and we're all stuck inside this system, which is beautiful, but also has its troubles. So that was how the show developed. It would show one and the other, and then sort of started merging them. So that's a nice one from Nick. And then I think if we've got time,
we have
is that the end?
1 minute and a half.
A minute and a half. Okay. So let's go back to the one before that, because that would be a nice way to finish, because that's a 1 minute, another commentary on the infinite. So I wanted to have the infinitude of time, essentially, and us as this tiny little dot in between, the infinitude, the potential infinitude of time going before and after us. It certainly doesn't have any ending which we can, be certain of. Can you put the video before this on, the one you had before, A Fleeting Life, it's called, starting with the dot. It's a 1 minute video, so it should round off nicely. If you can go back. And what I did was started the show with this long section of blank screen, and then this dot emerges, and then we used traditional, Kevin Mclaughlin used traditional, cinematic techniques to capture a life in a minute. So no, it wasn't that one. It was the one that started with the dot. So anyway, he used basically took imagery that we'd all relate to, of a child and then someone, going to school, and it was almost like presenting a life. And he squeezed the whole thing into 1 minute. Here we go. It starts with a dot for a while, and then you basically get this. Yep.
Excuse me. I think that we have only like 20 minutes left.
Okay.
And in this time, we can only say thank you very much for helping us start this special edition of Sónar+D, CCCB, and also thanking your collaborators, Martin and Andy, and inviting people to join your show tomorrow. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Max. Please, I'm going to ask the audience that's here physically to join hands together for Max Cooper.